Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we want to be respectful of your time. So, we're going to go ahead and get started as a few other people are hopping on. Welcome to Network 19's monthly networking and provider session. We appreciate you being here. My name is Ann Weissent. I am the outreach coordinator for Network 19 and 19 Services. 19 Services is our parent organization, and Network 19 is a service of 19 Services. So thank you again for joining us. I'm here today with Haida Hill, also from 19 Services. So we are the team that kind of puts together these sessions for providers, and Haida's going to help me out and kind of drive everything in the background for me today, drive the presentation. We will do our best to also monitor chat. So Haida, if you want to go ahead and get the PowerPoint pulled up, we will get started.
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks, Haida. So today, in our agency session, we are going to talk about planning with purpose. How can we elevate the voices of those we serve? Go ahead. And we are pretty informal here, pretty laid back group. So if you are comfortable turning on your cameras, we would love to see your faces. It's so much easier when you present and you're presenting to people. But if not, that's absolutely fine. We're just glad to have you. Also, again, everybody is muted coming in, but you have the ability to unmute yourself. So please feel free, if we're talking about something, to unmute, share your experiences, or ask a question. The real purpose of Network 19 is not necessarily us, presenting all the information. We are not the real subject matter experts. You guys are the ones who are out there daily providing the services. So your experiences are so valuable. So again, if you want to share an experience, how you're doing something, anything like that, that would be great. Also, if you have questions and you don't want to unmute and ask, that's perfectly fine. We will monitor chat to the best of our ability throughout the session. We'll have a little bit of time at the end to try to go through. If we don't get an opportunity to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation, and when you get a copy of your presentation emailed to you. My email link is in there. You can directly email me with any questions that you have. So please feel free to do that. So as I said, you will get a copy of the slide deck, as well as any handouts that we might reference throughout the conversation today, and that will be sent to you sometime early next week. And additionally, we know that people can't always find an hour and a half in their day to sit and listen to us, because you are very busy delivering services. So if you have colleagues that can't attend with us, or if you just want to go back and refresh on something we said, the presentation will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you will have that link as well at the end of the slide deck. Go ahead. All right, so what do we want to accomplish today? These are my goals for the day, and I hope we're able to meet them for you. My hope is by the end of the training today, we'll be able to identify ways to gather and use meaningful information and data about the people that you support, well beyond just those routine things, someone's diagnosis, what their outcomes were on different services and supports and things. So we all go to meetings. We're very used to, John did 90% of this with independent skills, and 10% of them he needed hand over hand assistance, whatever. Like, it's much bigger than that. And so how do we gather and use that meaningful information as we continuously plan and support people throughout their services? We also want to make sure that we are supporting authentic and active participation in the person-centered planning process. So making sure that, at meetings, people really have a voice. What is their role? Do they understand what their role is? Does the team respect their role in that meeting? So we're going to talk about how we can help support that. We're going to also talk about different communication strategies for doing that. Obviously, we support people of all different types of abilities. Some people communicate with words. Some people communicate with alternative or augmented communication devices. Some people are not English as a first language. So how do we help people? And what are the strategies we use to make sure that no matter how someone communicates, they're able to communicate as they engage in the planning process? And then also just making sure that as an organization and as an agency, we are supporting the philosophy of person-centered planning in more than just preparing for the meeting. How do we do that in a dynamic way that is across the whole span of someone's life? Because person-centered planning is not just a single meeting. It's not just getting ready for a single meeting. It is a fluid living process. I was sitting down earlier this morning and just kind of thinking through, what I wanted to say about this. And I thought, okay, do I want to use this example or not? It's a little bit morbid. But I was at a funeral for a family member a couple months ago, and the minister that was officiating used an analogy that I'm sure many of us have heard when we've gone to a celebration of life or something, and it is about the idea that people have a date when something starts, whether that's their life or whatever, and they have a date when something ends. And in between is a dash. Well, it's the exact same thing in planning, right? People's plans run from July 1st, 2026 dash June 30th, 2025. And so we know that, on July 1st, as providers, that's when our work starts. That's when we start implementing the plan. And we know that on or about June 30th, hopefully well before, is when the meeting and that actual plan development occurs. But what happens in between? What is the true plan implementation that happens between those two dates? What does that look like? How do we make sure that it is, again, kind of living and breathing and keeps going? So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. I have a whole thing of notes and I'm not even looking at them, which is what I tend to do. And then I get totally off. So, okay, let's go on to the next, one. So, think about somebody you support and kind of hold them in your mind as we're talking through these things today. And do you know that person's story? Do you know more about them? Do your DSPs know more about them than just what is on a piece of paper? And so we want to talk about how do we create systems that helps not only our staff and our direct support professionals to gather meaningful information and data about the people we serve, but also to make sure that others who support the person through the team process, whether they be natural supports through their family or a friend in the community, whether they be other paid providers, because we know that in many instances, people are receiving services from more than one provider. Maybe there's a residential provider and then there's a day program provider. Maybe we have folks that also go to school, so the school's involved, and other professionals who are all part of that team of support. And so how do we make sure that we are not only learning the person's story ourselves, but then using the information and data that we accumulate and gather on that person to share that story with others? And so today we're going to build a little bit upon the session that we did last month. Again, if you weren't able to be with us last month, you can always go back to our YouTube channel and take a look at that. But last month, we talked a lot about how you as an organization can help ensure that your direct support professionals understand the importance of documentation, not just making sure that they're filling out and that the documentation sheet has all those 14 required elements, but what do we do with that, right? And how can we use that to create an image and a story about the person, again, that is bigger than just, check marking the time we started or writing in the location of services. And I know a lot of people said during that session, like, we don't really have a large space in our documentation program or forms or whatever you're using to write that story. And so we're going to talk again a little bit about how we can collect that data so that it helps with sharing that person's story. Go ahead. So there's really two kinds of information that are really important about helping write someone and share someone's story. And a complete picture, a complete story for the person requires both of these things. So we need to not only know what the person needs, which is typically what we tend to focus on. We're missing the other half. So in team meetings, we talk a lot about what people need, whether that is a team meeting with the SSA as the part of the plan development, whether those are team meetings that we're doing internally, staff meetings, those types of things. We tend to always focus on what someone needs and are we meeting those needs. But the part that we miss, the other part of that story, is really who that person is. And so those are things that help us identify what brings joy and meaning to people's lives, what someone's personal values and beliefs are, and also making sure that once we identify what those are, that we are again telling that story to our DSPs and to other people that engage with them so that they can respect those values and beliefs. The strengths, gifts, and contributions that people make. Again, we often, when we're talking about need, we focus on the negatives and what is missing or lacking, but we need to, in order to really envision and share who that person is, we also have to focus on those strengths, gifts, and contributions. We need to focus on relationships that matter to people. And we need to take our judgment out of those relationships. So making sure, again, that we are focusing on who the person is based on the relationships that they have with others and people's dreams and aspirations for the future. We know what the needs are. We know what we focus on. We focus on supporting requirements. Are we meeting requirements? Are we compliant? And that is important, right? But it's again only half of the picture. We focus on health and safety needs. Again, absolutely vital to supporting someone successfully, but only half of the picture. Communication methods and tools, behavioral patterns and triggers, environmental preferences. And we tend to not only focus on those, but also over document those. There's always this sense as a provider of kind of, we need to protect ourselves. We need to make sure that we can validate what we're doing. We need to make sure that if there's an issue, we can show we did everything we needed to do. Again, very important. I'm not in any way trying to de-emphasize someone's needs, just saying that they need to be weighed in accordance with who the person are. Go ahead. All right, so let's talk about some of the data that providers gather or can gather if you're not already, that both support a person's wants and their needs. So there is a list of 2, 4, 6, I believe 9, 8, maybe it's 8. There's a list of 8 data points that I'm sharing because I believe they are important in helping us build that whole picture and tell the story of the person. So, in supporting the person's wants and needs, we should be looking at and gathering data around daily routines and preferences. Again, pretty simple when you're looking at the plan and you say the person has an outcome to engage in community activities. All right, so we can check mark what day did they do it, how long were they doing it, and maybe something as simple as, Anne went to church on Sunday with her mom. Check mark, right? But are we really getting into those details that help us understand, well, when Anne goes to church with her mom, it's more than just her mom picking her up, dropping her back off, and saying how was church today, right? It really should be things like that, things that even start before that activity. What do you want to wear? What, do you go, do we know kind of the culture of the church? I've been to some churches that are ultra formal. You go, you wear a dress, the women are dressed up. I go to other churches that I've been to with friends or family, which are really laid back. Our local church here, our Catholic diocese here, it is pretty laid back. I see people in jeans. I see people that are going at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they haven't necessarily spent a lot of time gussying up, my grandma's word, gussying up for the occasion. But knowing what that culture is like, so that not only what the person prefers for that activity, but also, are you helping develop um, cohesion with that group? Are you helping them fit in? And so it's more than just, again, documenting those daily routines. It's also, what are the preferences? How do I help this person? What do I know about the activity or the event, to help them fit in and be integrated into that setting or into that event? So looking at preferred food, clothing, activities, the times of day with highest engagement. You are not going to get me engaged before 9 o'clock any day for any reason. That just doesn't happen. My husband is up at 5:30 on the nose every single day. He spends 2.5 hours with his breakfast, watching the news, and then he's out the door at about 7:45 to start his day. I was up this morning at about 7:45 when he was getting ready to leave, to start prepping for this and doing some work at 8 o'clock. So about 15 minutes for me, about 2.5 hours for him. We are very different people. He's in bed at 10. I'm still up texting my friends, engaging on social media at 1 o'clock in the morning. So knowing those types of things, again, helps paint that picture of the person's preferences. So I'm not going to go through all of them. This is going to all be in your handout. And also, I can take up a lot of time, and I want to try to stay true to our time. But this matters because patterns reveal what's important to the person and helps to guide consistent support. Behavioral communication data. Again, not everyone has some type of formal behavior plan, but all of us have behavior. I know that, again, there are days that if you engaged with me, you would be going back to a team saying, Anne needs a behavior plan, right? She completely refused. She was throwing a fit about it. I just have those moments in my life, as we all do. So how do we track that in a meaningful way that helps us get to the root of the communication versus automatically assuming or making the judgment that this person had this particular reaction, it was a negative reaction, therefore maybe we need to have a behavior plan. And I think what's important for DSPs and for organizations to think about is that you really have that level of detail about a person, that when a team says, maybe this was the event that happened at a day program and you're the residential provider, and you can say, yeah, we deal with similar things at home like that as well, but we've determined that what Anne is communicating is, again, her engagement doesn't start till 9 o'clock. And so maybe we need to look at changing her start time at the day program, because you guys are getting her, she's getting there at 8:30 in the morning and she's not ready to start her day. And then you're seeing it as a behavior, when what we've already determined as the residential provider is it's really just her way of communicating, I'm not ready to start my day. So looking at signs of comfort or distress, looking at body language, gesture, facial expressions, precursors to behaviors. Again, is it truly a behavior, or am I trying to communicate something? So all of those things are also important to gather, again, to help build this bigger picture of the person. Go ahead. I'm totally not even looking at my notes. Sensory profile and environment. So again, um, I don't think that we often think about these things outside of someone who has a negative, who has a reaction who that has been assumed to be negative, and then we over document this stuff, right? So the soon as the person has a behavior plan, we're looking at some of these types of things, right? But again, without a behavior plan, sensory sensitivities, noise, lighting, texture, smells, they can affect your day. I'm not a real comfortable person going into Walmart on a Saturday. There are just way too many people for me. It's overstimulating for me. I want to get in and get out, and I can't do that on a rush hour Saturday, right? Or a rush during rush hour on Saturday. So I know that on the weekends, I do Walmart pickup. That works better for me. During the week, I can pop in and get that loaf of bread or something that I need, but to get my full weekly groceries, I'm not going in there on a Saturday or generally on a Sunday, because it's much more busy. Doesn't mean I need a behavior plan because I refuse to shop on weekends. It just means, again, that we need to be cognizant and we need to be tracking those things so that when we're planning and when the team is planning for the person, yeah, maybe they do want the person to have an outcome about becoming independent in shopping. And maybe they are working on an outcome or a service about preparing a meal. And part of that whole process is, getting the recipe, writing out your shopping list, going to the grocery store. And then all of a sudden we're like, well, we're only available to take them to the grocery store on Saturday. And they keep refusing. And then we go down this rabbit hole of, oh, it's a refusal. Is that a behavior? So keeping track of these things in a way that you can present it at a team meeting or in the course of conversation, or even as you're training DSP, so a new DSP knows how to better support someone. These are valuable data points that can help with that. And it helps to create an environment that supports the person's participation. We are more inclined to participate in spaces and places where we feel comfortable and at ease. Engagement and participation. So again, keeping track of activities the person initiates and sustains. And maybe right now it's not even anything that's part of the plan because nobody's even recognized that, right? But again, if we're sitting at home and I notice that in the house we have a card table up with a puzzle that's just always there, like, it's just something available for people to get up and go to, and all of a sudden, we see Haida, who starts to get up and go over there and spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And Haida's usually a person who, quickly moves from event to event, or activity to activity. But all of a sudden this is unusual. She doesn't usually spend 20 minutes doing something. So now we start observing. Now we start saying, okay, why is this different? What is it that she likes about the person? And as we go to another planning meeting, we can start talking about, here's an activity that she's initiating on her own. She's sustaining it for 20 minutes, which is 10 times the amount of time she usually can stay engaged in an activity. Um, and then lo and behold, the puzzle's done after a month. And we're like, wow, she independently completed that puzzle. It took her a month of small 20-minute sessions, but she did it. And so that's important. That is valuable information. Um, also, and I think this gets overlooked a lot, is as providers and with staffing ratios and staffing issues, it is very difficult to almost impossible in a congregate setting to provide a lot of one-on-one community integration. It just is. We get it, right? I know it happens, but it's not something that can be done as frequently as we would all like. So it's important that as we're planning group activities, that we really are cognizant of what are the different types of community settings and events and activities in which each person thrives? And is there a way that we can focus on those more limited one-on-one engagements in the community with that person based on the places where they thrive? Can we use that data, for instance, in a 4-person congregate setting? Can we use that data to help us do staffing planning so that we can say, okay, Ann doesn't like Walmart on Saturdays, but we got to go to Walmart on Saturday. Is it possible for us to staff so that the 3 folks who do like that more active community engagement, who don't get upset and frustrated at Walmart on Saturday, can still go do what they want to do while Anne is either doing a separate activity or is able to hang out at home and has some staffing. So that's not only positive from a planning perspective, but it's also positive for you as an organization for a staffing and scheduling perspective to the best that you can. And then also technology that they use and how they use it. So again, engaging or making sure that we are taking that into consideration when we talk about folks participating and engaging in events. Go ahead to the next one.
And I was going to actually just kind of step in here for a second and talk
Yeah,
about the
absolutely.
technology piece of it because we are, in a technology state and, the wants versus needs and applying that to the technology piece as well. That when we're looking at whether, it's not just remote supports, it could be different types of equipment, different types of devices, different types of things within the home or physically on the person, that's, kind of weaving that into those same conversations as well when it comes to the technology piece. So just kind of wanted to toss that in there.
No, absolutely. And I think another thing to consider with technology, and it really fits into the concept that person-centered planning is not a meeting. It is ongoing and living and breathing, is that technology is changing so quickly that we may identify something at the annual meeting that we're like, oh, this is the best technology and it's going to be super useful. And 3 months later, there is a better technology out for that same thing. Don't wait. We don't want to wait then 9 more months to integrate that new technology. So being able to gather that data and data collection, and I think we talk a little bit about this a little bit later on, but data collection isn't just what we write on a piece of paper. So when we talk about gathering data, it can just purely be observational. But it's again making sure that your DSPs, people in your organization, your frontline supervisors, whoever have the opportunity for engagement with people are thinking about what am I learning from this person every time I engage with them? And how is that useful? And, a lot of times we don't think about our interactions and our observations as data, but it really is. Um, Health, wellness, and regulation. Things like pain indicators, changes in sleep, appetite, mobility, emotional regulation of emotions, and effects of medication or interventions. We want to make sure that we're supporting people's health and safety, but that we're also doing it in a way that supports their comfort, some autonomy in being able to identify and share with people that support them how they're feeling, those types of things. I do want to. I served a person when I was in SSA years and years, many. I was actually called a case manager, so if that tells you how long ago it was. But I supported a young man really neat young man. Was not did not communicate with words. Had a lot of what back then, we just identified as behaviors. And they were pretty significant. I mean, he could hurt people. Um, and we were going through this period of time with him where he was really, really getting very very, very dangerous to his peers and to staff that were working with him. And we couldn't figure out, like, yeah, he had typical behaviors, but this was like way above what we would typically see, the frequency, the intensity. And we just absolutely could not figure it out. And there was a direct support professional that was working with the person who gave us some clues. And she talked about the fact that she noticed during personal care that they were brushing his teeth, doing some hand over hand, but they were seeing more blood. The gums seemed to be bleeding more, and she happened to notice that. And I don't know if it was her or another DSP that also said, he loves coffee, but he hasn't been drinking his coffee in the morning. He'll let it cool down before he drinks it. And he's usually the guy that, like, you had to try to get him to wait because you were afraid he was going to burn his mouth. So we started talking about those things. And the supervisor came and sat down with me and said, I wonder if he's having some dental issues. Like, these are new indicators. We didn't wait till the next planning meeting, to have that conversation. And lo and behold, he went to the dentist and he had a severe impaction of one of his teeth that had led to a large kind of cyst of infection in there. So it had to be super painful. And that's what he was trying to communicate. They treated it and he went back to baseline, still having significant behaviors, but not at this increased intensity. So being able to again really reiterate with your direct support professionals that they are the eyes and ears, like they see people every single day. And other than family, and sometimes even more than family, they are going to be the first ones that see these small, minute changes that give us some clue that something needs to be done, whether that's in this example, a medical appointment, or maybe a service or a support needs to be modified or changed. Maybe we need to add something, etc. Um, Communication. So again, tracking data about people's communication abilities and their preferences. So what are their preferred communication methods? Are they We have some people who have limited verbal skills. And so maybe there are times when they're with preferred people that words are okay because they feel comfortable that that person can understand them. Um, and then other times in other settings, maybe they're not as comfortable using words because those folks aren't as close to them and their speech is harder to understand. And so we see then with that person, they kind of clam up, like, I don't know why they're not talking. Like, they always talk to me. Well, yeah, I feel comfortable talking to you because you know me and you can understand when my words maybe don't come out exactly right. But I'm going to clam up when I'm with strangers. When I go see the doctor, I'm not talking to him at all. So, how do I identify those preferred communication methods, when they're used, and then what types of um, tech or alternative communication is available to me to get my story out there. Um, and then what works best? What works best for the person generally? And are we supporting that mode of communication for them? It ensures that people are heard and understood, even when they either choose or can't use words. And I want to expand this into people we support where English is not their primary language. So thinking about as an organization, what do we have to support someone, or what can we get to support someone who uses ASL? What can we get, or what do we have to support someone who speaks a different language? And it doesn't always have to be the fact that we have a direct support professional. Again, there is so much technology out there. I was at a conference about a year or so ago where somebody came with I don't know that they were from Meta, but they had glasses, and those glasses could interpret sign language into a earpiece that a person was wearing. It was absolutely amazing. So the technology is out there as well, and looking at how we can access that technology, how we can train our staff to use that technology, and how we can use that technology to support people with different communication preferences. Okay.
And I just kind of would hop in there and say that sometimes too, it's easy because we are in such a technology, space. It's also kind of hard too. Like sometimes it's not a matter of big fancy devices, right? Like our DSPs more than likely have a cell phone and or there might be a computer or a tablet within the home. And so sometimes, using those like storyboards of if then what kind of scenarios and if it's okay, Anne, I'm going to tell just a super fast story here.
Please. No,
So
go ahead.
kind of along Anne's lines of, working with someone, that was having some behavioral challenges regarding an impacted tooth, and also talking about that Saturday morning grocery shopping trip that maybe I don't want to take, but maybe, Catherine would want to go on, right? Because it's okay on her schedule. But maybe there's also, maybe we're talking to the individual about going somewhere that they've never been before. And that could potentially cause anxiety. Like if we think about that even for ourselves, sometimes we're like, hey, I kind of want to know where we're going. Is there going to be food there? Is there going to be something to drink there? Am I going to be bringing enough money with me? And so sometimes, thinking through the process from our own perspective of what we might like to have help with. Maybe it's just a matter of pulling up those pictures on the phone or on the, iPad of like, hey, this is where we're looking at going today. Does that seem like a cool place to go? And utilizing those technology pieces that are like right in our hands to kind of fall right in line with we're actually using some different types of what would be like storyboards because we have technology so quick at our hands, kind of like Anne back in the day, we all had those little pictures that were on like little Velcro things, right, to create our if then what storylines. And I feel like we have a lot more at our hands with the technology that we have and kind of thinking through that at a broader scale. So
Thanks. So I just wanted to, I switched over to me, so we'll have to switch back to you when I'm done with this. But I created a couple of tools for you all. These will be part of the handouts. And so these are things you can use with your DSPs about how to capture data within those 8 categories that we talked about. So it just is broken down. For example, the first one was daily routine and preferences. It gives some of those examples of what those things are that DSPs should be kind of watching for and paying attention to. And then it gives an example of how a direct support professional, through their documentation or however you're capturing this, could write out an informative note about daily routines and preferences. So this is kind of this first sheet I'm showing you is kind of a training sheet. So it's something that you could use to go over with your direct support
hey,
professionals.
Anne, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna pause real fast. So I'm still sharing my screen. I think everybody's still seeing the presentation. So I
Oh,
can
sorry.
stop. That's okay. I can stop sharing if you want to share.
Yeah, it says I'm sharing my screen. So
Oh,
that's why
so
I
sorry.
thought it maybe took
Okay.
you off.
It may have just been me. Sorry about that.
Are others, can somebody tell me, are you seeing the PowerPoint or are you seeing a Word document?
A Word document now.
Okay, thanks, Sammy.
Thanks, Sammy.
Okay. And then Haida, when I hit stop share, I'll let you know. So in case you need to hit share again. So we will make this available to you. And then the other form that I have is the actual blank sheet that you could use. You feel free to modify this in any way, make it electronic versus a piece of paper, integrate it into your documentation sheets, whatever. I mean, these are not like this, we're not saying, oh, here's the form you have to use, right? These are just things for you to think about and tools that you can use to build your own system. But this is a way where this one is set up in a way where it could be actually filled out by the direct support professional. And then how frequently. We all know that direct support professionals I mean, we're paperwork to death. And it's hard to even find time to get done the required paperwork, let alone to say, hey, I got one more sheet to collect some more data, right? So how can you integrate this in to that system of documentation? How frequently? Is it something where it's built into the doc sheet? So every single day when staff are completing their documentation, they're writing in some of these descriptors, some of these observational points? Or is it something where once a week or once a month, you want to ask the DSP to sit down and say, okay, just think about your observations, your interactions, your engagement with Anne during the last month. Give us a little bit of information. And then your frontline supervisors and your leaders have that to look at and utilize as they're planning for upcoming meetings. Or guys, I've seen this in the last 2 months. 2 or 3 DSPs that work with Sharon have said this. Maybe I need to reach out to the SSA, use this data to support that there's a need. I'm going to stop share, and again, we'll send these along with the PowerPoint. But I also want to say, and Haida, I think you will have to reshare. I also want to say, and please, I have worked at all levels of this system, from the county board to the department to now, back to, well, before the county board, I was a DSP. So DSP, county board, department, and now back to working with providers directly. So I say this with the utmost respect to anyone who's a county board employee, anybody who's a department employee. But we know that there are times when providers will go back to a team and make a suggestion, and there are questions about what is motivating that suggestion.
Like scrubs. Yeah, they don't look like leggings or anything, right?
No. Give me 1 second, because I'm going to mute somebody. I don't think they mean for us to hear their conversation. So this data collection gives validity to those things that we are bringing to the team. And I think that will potentially go a long way. I know over the years, I've had providers, both independent and agencies, come to me and say, hey, we are struggling with the relationship we have with the parent or the guardian or the team or whoever. What do we do? How can we improve that relationship? And I think sometimes those struggles with those other partners are based on not everyone having the same information. So I think data collection not only helps tell the story, it also, as a provider, helps to support you as you're engaging with other partners about different needs and things that may need to change for folks that you're supporting. Anybody have an experience or just as an example about maybe you already you have methods that you use to gather this data and how it's been successful in helping the team make changes, or how that someone's plan's been updated? Anybody have any experiences they want to share? Okay, well, hop in anytime if you do. So let's go to the next one.
I think is this where we ended?
Yes,
Okay.
so we should be going one more.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
That's okay. Hold on. Maybe I flipped mine too. I did. I flipped mine too soon. Sorry about that. All right. So go to why the data matters. There we go. Thank you. I'm sorry. So we talked a little bit about what it helps communicate to others on the team, making sure that folks have a real good picture of the person's true preferences. It supports self-determination, being able to gather this data, and then someone who we support is saying to their team, I don't want to do this anymore, or I want to do something different. We're able to support them by showing we have data that supports what the person is wanting. It helps us to prepare for meetings. It helps us to empower the person to use their voice in meetings. It reduces guesswork. It increases dignity for the person. So again, it allows the person to have somebody who has their back, right? Like when they go in and say, I don't want to do this anymore. We're able to not only voice our support for them, but also share, some data that supports the why behind that request. It helps to ensure consistent service delivery across providers. So if you are documenting and maintaining data that helps to build and write the person's story, the best thing we can do is make sure that we are sharing that with others so that the person is getting not necessarily the exact same services, but that they are getting consistency in how those services are delivered because other people understand their wants, their preferences, their communication style, all those things. It helps balance important to and important for. I would say that the majority of those of you who've participated in team meetings would probably agree with me that the important for generally outweighs the important to conversations in those meetings. And it helps to strengthen outcomes. I'm still a person who struggles with the whole person centered planning outcome thing. I come from the old school of task analysis and step by step and all that kind of stuff. So outcomes are challenging when we start thinking broad and how we document and all that kind of stuff. But outcomes are so important because I don't live my life by a step by step. Get out the toothpaste, put the toothpaste on the brush, pick up the brush. Those whole old habilitation skill building types of documentation and services that we did. So it makes sense, but it's also difficult for some of us who've been around to kind of capture that whole concept of bigger, broader outcome-based services. So this knowing the person, really understanding who they are, what they want, helps with that as well. So we talked about the collection sheet and the training tool, which we will share in our handouts, but the underlined wording there at the bottom is a link, which will take you directly to the Charting the Life course website. If you aren't using Charting the Life course, that philosophy, that system has a lot of really good tools that can be integrated in meaningful ways into capturing the preferences of people, preferences around relationships, preferences around communication strategies. So I wanted to at least link that for you so you could take a look at it. There's one called the Integrated Star. There is a path trajectory for people to be like, get to know them where they are, but then also talk about where they want to be. So there's a lot of good tools in there. Feel free to utilize those. All right, next screen. So building a complete picture, capturing all this data that we've talked about, writing that story, helping people share their stories. we have to do that using multiple methods. So we've talked about observation and the importance of observation and making sure that your DSPs understand the importance of observation and how to share, track, and document what they're observing. Direct conversation, making sure that we are using a technique of conversation in which we are not giving people easy options to say yes or no. We do know, and a lot of studies have shown, that when people are giving closed-ended answers, they will answer in the way that they think the asker wants them to answer. So you may not be getting a clear picture of what the person's true wants and needs are unless you're asking open-ended questions. Making sure that we listen more than we speak. That's a tough one for me. I have to remind myself to stop and be okay with silence, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time for folks to process that question that you ask them. So don't move on too quickly. Make sure that you're paying and your direct support professionals are paying attention to listening. Records and history, utilize the history. You know, old school, we used to have to talk about updating social histories and all of that. Still a requirement in some of the older department and state rules. So I know a lot of you do it, but how do we use that? Like, is it just a mundane, like, okay, I got to update the social history again this year? Or are we really sharing that with, again, direct support professionals, other members of the team? Are we asking questions and capturing data within that social history that is more than just a person's diagnosis? So take a look at things like social history, past plans, historical documentation, so that you can look for context and continuity, especially if you're seeing a change with someone. Family and support, making sure that part of building this picture is talking to others who might have a different perspective on a situation than you do. That helps to validate your interpretation of what you're seeing or what you're observing or what the person's telling you. So this gets back to the idea that a lot of people have multiple providers. So how are those multiple providers working together to make sure that they all have a consistent picture of the person, what's important to them, what's important for them, and that implementation of supporting that person is consistent across environments. Preference assessments. So using structured tools to identify choices and priorities, making sure that we are looking at, sorry, I'm looking at my notes for this because I thought I had some notes in here about preference assessments, but I don't see it. And then routine mapping, understanding what is a good day and what does that look like for a person. And so how do we track that? How do we build upon that, and map that out so that if that's what we're seeing in this environment, can we see that same good day? Are we mapping that out in another environment to say, why does it look different? No single source is sufficient. All of this together helps to build that complete picture, and make sure that what's being captured is accessible so that, again, it's not just the frontline supervisor that has access to it. Can the DSP see it? Can the nurse see it? Can the therapist see it? So that everybody is seeing that same picture of the person, they're hearing the same story, and it leads to more consistency in service delivery. So how do we go ahead? How do we take this data and make it more than just a bunch of words and a bunch of chicken scratch on a piece of paper? How do we actually turn this into supporting someone to have a voice? And we want to make sure that we're turning what we know about the person into an opportunity for the person to share that voice with others. And I think it starts, go ahead. I think it starts generally with having a Plan about how you use data year round as part of the planning process. And there are 5 components to a successful data collection process that occur year round and are part of the natural ISP development process. Preparing for the ISP isn't just the role of the SSA. It should be something that everyone engaged in that process is thinking about, and that they're thinking about it again, not just 60 days before the plan meeting, that they're thinking about it continually throughout the year and figuring out how to use what they learn as part of that planning process. And that planning process includes engaging with the team consistently throughout the year. So ongoing learning, that is the first component. And again, it's not just for the DSP, it's not just for the provider. It is for everybody involved in supporting the person. So while the DSP and the provider may be the one that is observing and documenting and having conversations with the person all year round, they also are sharing that. And they are also using that as the catalyst for bigger discussion with everyone that supports the person. Using the data to organize and reflect to help prepare for meetings, not just the annual meeting. And I probably should change this slide because it does say before the annual meeting, but 60 to 90 days before the annual meeting is a great time to get in there, organize all the documentation, take a look at the data, reflect on what it means, and find themes so you're prepared for the annual meeting. But you're also throughout the year going to have those spot checks where you're like, oh wow, I just looked at 2 months worth of documentation from all the DSPs that work with Anne, and this is important. I need to try to pull the team back together to talk about that. Make sure that, again, throughout the year, you're engaging with the person, that DSPs are sharing what they learned, that they know who to go to if they see a change, an indicator of, maybe an unmet need. And just make sure that, we're saying, look, are the services we're really providing right now today, do they feel right? Has something changed? Did we miss something in the annual planning meeting that 3 months later we recognize? So staying engaged, making sure that there is an active plan for folks to act upon a change. Identifying priority, together decide what matters most in the planning cycle. And again, this can be done and should be done purposely as you prepare for the annual plan, but it should also just be a natural occurring part of the annual planning process that could result in a change in the plan at any time. And then finally, when it is time for a meeting, preparing for that meeting. And I know, again, going back to my experience as a provider, generally as either the Q when I was working in an ICF or as a manager for a congregate living setting, I was the one who was preparing for the meeting. It wasn't often that DSPs were coming to the meetings and sitting in on the meetings. So I was the person that was preparing for that meeting. And so organizations need to think about, how do we do that in a way that gathers information from DSPs and the people that know the person well, but also supports and helps the person to share their voice, and whether that is part of formally participating in the meeting. There are some people that just choose not to go to the meetings, but I know I've sat in several meetings where the person is there. There's always a push to have the person there because the philosophy is the person is the center of the meeting, but they don't engage. They're not an active participant. So as a provider, how can we help them have meaningful participation? And there may be some people, again, that communicate with words, that you can say things during the meeting like, hey, John, what do you think about this? Or, hey, John, that one time you told me you didn't like this. You want to tell the story to the team? So there are ways to prompt people if they're maybe not quite as verbal or they don't take the initiative to speak up. But for other people who maybe maybe aren't comfortable using their words in that type of an environment. They're used to sitting back and letting the professionals take the lead. So this isn't a role that they're used to, or people who maybe don't use words to communicate. We can create visuals. And we'll talk in a minute about some of the ways that we can create visuals and help the person express themselves as they engage with their team in an alternative way. So Carla is giving us, I think, an example. So let me open this up and we'll look at it. So Carla says the SSA meets in April with the person and team to start planning. And I'm not sure when the person's plan starts again. So Carla, is that 60 days in advance? Is that 90 days? So they're starting that process 90 days in advance. And that's great. It's even better though if we also see the team and the team lead, the SSA, being mindful that we also have to have discussions throughout the whole year to talk about what's happening in the dash between the start year and the end year, the start date and the end date. So, but it's great to see folks not waiting until a week before the meeting to get started, because we all know we see that as well. So 90 days is a great time to start that conversation and begin reviewing that data and getting prepared for the meeting. So that's great. Okay, next slide. So as we're preparing for the meetings, or there's an opportunity that comes up throughout the year for an impromptu conversation, how do we support the person to actively participate in that? And so some of the things that we can do is about 2 to 4 weeks before a planned meeting, we can go over the meeting format and agenda with the person, make sure that they know who's going to be there, what role the person plays, remind them maybe, oh, you met this person, the last time we had our meeting and they were there and they were the person that talked about what they're doing in physical therapy with you, or, they're the person that comes to your work and, talks to you when you're at your day program or on your job site, or they come to the home and talk with you. So just help them know who's going to be in the meeting, kind of what those people's roles are, what the meeting might look like, where is it going to be, is that where they want it to be, would you like me to ask them to meet at the park instead of at some formal office? So you can begin that preparation with the person to help reduce anxiety and to be more familiar and not be spooked by unknowns that might pop up when they get there. Maybe a day before a planned meeting, you can talk to the person about, tomorrow is your meeting. What is one thing you would really like the people on the team to know about you or to learn about you? Can I help you share that? How do you plan to share it? And so you can prepare the person by really initiating the thought with them that it is about, that the conversation at the meeting is really about what is important to them. A week or so before the meeting, sorry, I was supposed to go across and I didn't, I started going down. You can create personalized visual supports or talking cards to bring to the meeting to help the person be organized. I know years ago when I was in college, there was no way I could get up and do a presentation like this if I didn't have my little, index cards with everything laid out, reading directly from the index cards. But those were visual and they were something that I could hold, that was tactile, that kept me kind of centered on my conversation and what my role was and what I was doing. So there are some people that may be helpful for. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about other types of visual supports, especially for folks who are not using traditional words for communication. So we talked about the day before. During the meeting, make sure that you ask the person, hey, do you want me to help you get your point across? Do you want me to help you figure out what is the role they want you to play in supporting them? And if you see them struggling in the meeting, instead of just, again, jumping in, hey, Anne, is it okay if I share that experience with them? Or do you want to take a minute? Do you want to, go get a drink of water. So any way that you can assist them and do it in a way where you're giving them the lead to decide when they want you to jump in. Translate jargon. We all talk in jargon in this field. And even in meetings with professionals, there are times when I have to sit back and say, they may not know what that acronym means. They may not know what, that terminology means. And just ensure their voice leads every agenda item. And so when the SSA or the team lead is saying, now we're going to talk about the day program. Hey, so and so, tell us how they're doing at their day program. The gentle kind of, oh wait, maybe Anne could start the conversation about what she likes about her day program. So try to do that, but try to do it, of course, in kind of a natural, non-confrontational way. I understand those dynamics, and so you have to think about like how do you do that without also feeling like or making it seem like maybe to the team lead that you're trying to take that role. If things go sideways during the meeting, re-anchor gently. Can we hear from Anne about this? And do everything you can to try to keep the person at the center. Again, we tend to go down rabbit holes with negativity a lot of times in these meetings. So balance that. Yes, I know Anne is struggling with this, but here are some things that we've seen that she's been able to successfully do independently. And maybe we can learn from how she did those to help her gain more skills in this area where she's struggling. So think about those concepts of keeping the person at the center, focusing on positives and trying to gently reroute the conversation in teams if necessary. And then don't forget about afterwards. Don't forget about going back to the person and saying, what did you think about that? Here's the things that, was decided in the meeting. This year, we're going to work on this. And this year, we're going to work on that. Are you excited about that? Do you feel good about that? You did a great job at the meeting. Celebrate that, right? And also, if they say to you there was something negative about the meeting, help them come up with a plan on, okay, how are we going to address that? Because we don't want to go a whole year with that being part of your plan if you feel like that's not what you want to do. You have a right to change your mind. And let's call your SSA together and say, hey, I know we just had the meeting last week, but we were going over it. And, Anne's really not comfortable with you guys saying she has to go to Walmart every Saturday. How about Thursdays? They're less busy. Can we change the plan? Okay. All right, making the meeting accessible. I think probably I've touched on a lot of these. And again, I recognize the dynamics of a team meeting and that there are internal meetings that organizations control, and you have more ability to manage these things than maybe at the team meeting. But really, again, think about, are there ways that you can do it in a non-confrontational way that helps enhance the relationship you have with the SSA? Maybe the situation that I think it was it Kelly? Sorry, Carla shared with us, where they have SSAs who are planning early, right? So, can there be a conversation with the SSA about, hey, we want to make sure that, you understand that our purpose and why we are going to maybe redirect something or, depending on your relationship with the SSA. So I just want to say all that to say, I understand those dynamics. And sometimes these recommendations are easier said than done, right? So we talked about controlling the pace, allowing people time for processing, being comfortable with silence. And if you are in a team meeting with, 8 other people there and the person isn't responding and you're comfortable with silence, there may be 4 other people in that team meeting that aren't. And so give that reminder of, hey, Anne just needs a couple minutes usually to process what we're asking. Let's give it a chance. I think just give us a couple minutes and she'll be able to answer. So, we talked about jargon and interpreting. So making sure that, maybe again, if you have a good relationship with the SSA or the therapist or whoever's going to be at the meeting, other professionals, to say, hey, look, we're really helping Anne become more actively involved in her meeting. One way that we can do that is make sure we're all being cognizant of the terminology and the words we're using so that we're having a conversation at a place where everybody who's at the table can understand. You'll often hear self-advocates use nothing about me without me. It's not just about physically being at the table to be able to engage in a conversation and not feel like it's happening without you. It's also being able to actively participate in those conversations. If needed, assist the person with requesting an interpreter service. I know that's a hard service sometimes to find, but if a person can't actively participate because there's a communication barrier, we need to be advocating that communication barrier be addressed. Maybe the person is more visual. So asking the SSA, like, hey, I got the agenda that you emailed to me. Anne's going to be coming. Is there a way that we could work together to convert that agenda into visual representations because she doesn't read or whatever. Physical setup. How many times have we supported someone who uses a mobility device to go into a meeting only to find that they can't even get around the table because the chairs are so close to the wall? I began using a mobility device about a year and a half ago due to some physical issues. And I found even when I worked at the department that sometimes I would go downtown for a meeting with my colleagues, and it was in a room that there was not enough space for me to actually take my device in. And, I was able to have some limited mobility. So I could get up, park my mobility scooter at the door and walk in, but we support people who maybe don't have that ability. We talked about, and I think it's part of that controlling the pace, but active decision points. When that team is at a point where they are making a decision, this is what is going to be in the plan. Are we supporting a moment to ask the person directly, is this what you want? Did we understand your wants? Or, hey, we all think this is important for you. Do you think and agree that this is important for you? And if not, why? And if it's something that the team is still like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Like, if they don't do this, they're going to die. There is a health and safety risk. Like, then how can we educate you to understand why this is important for you? So just making sure that when there are active decision points, that there is some purposeful engagement with the person about their agreement to those decisions. And then also just make sure that both external meetings and internal meetings within your organization, are we always celebrating strengths first? Again, these team meetings tend to focus on the needs versus the wants. And it's easy to let the needs take the lead in the conversation. And when we're talking about needs, it means there is something that's unmet. There is a deficit and someone needs something. And that's usually built upon a negative factor. So if we can start those conversations with, yes, we all understand that there are services and supports that Sue is going to need this year, but we'd like to tell you about all of her accomplishments this year. So try to engage with the team to recommend that we start with that positive. Try to see, we have a comment in here. This is from Kat. If someone needs their paperwork in Braille, the county boards can usually help with translation. Also, if they know ahead of time, they can typically arrange for a translator to be in attendance. So absolutely. So that's that prepping for that meeting, being cognizant of what those communication skills are, and working together with the team and the team lead to make sure that's happening. But I can again tell you in 30 plus years of experience, I can count on maybe one one and a half hands, how many times anyone actually came before the meeting and said, can this be made available? And often what would happen is we would go to the meeting, the person would come, but they couldn't actively participate because no one had made that request in advance or thought about it or said at the meeting, oh, we need to do this. And then someone at the meeting said, well, when are we all going to have the time to get back together again or get our schedules together? And they'd go ahead with the meeting. So thank you, Kat. I agree. There are resources available, but sometimes we forget to ask for them. So we talked a little bit about and we're going to talk a little bit too about the communication preferences and how to support people where they are based on kind of their communication. But one of them is this idea of creating a vision board. And, you know, it doesn't have to be just because someone maybe doesn't use words to communicate. It could also just be, and I'll tell you right now, it's the trendy kind of thing, right? To do your vision board. There's everything all over TikTok and tutorials and all this stuff. So it's very trendy. So maybe somebody is just really cool and they want a vision board. But it can also be such a wonderful tool to help the person communicate their wants and their needs as well. It's also a really cool way to help DSPs get to know the person better. So engaging your direct support professionals throughout the year to say, hey, whether it's a true poster board or something that's on the wall, or maybe throughout the year you start with an old-fashioned photo album. I don't even know if they make photo albums anymore, right? But some type of a folder or something that throughout the year you're keeping things, whether those are pictures that we took at an event where someone was just smiling and giggling and having a great time and it's on somebody's phone, and you know, we say let's get that copied and printed off so we can add it to their vision board. Or whether it's time spent around, you know, a table in the home with old magazines, or looking at Pinterest and printing off things. However you do it, like, how can we capture throughout the year what the person wants to make sure that they are saying to their team for the upcoming year? I want to continue doing this because this was amazing and awesome. Or, you know what, I've never done this and I saw it and I heard somebody talk about doing it and this is what I want to do. Or even those bigger, like, this is my dream. And you know, I'm not going to ever fulfill some of my dreams. My dream is to go to Ireland. My husband's family has a castle that we've been able to trace back multiple generations, that's still standing. I would love for us to go. It's never going to happen. I have a severe anxiety of flying. So unless I get on a boat, and I get seasick. So I don't think it's ever going to happen, right? But that certainly doesn't mean that I can't have something on my vision board about that and then purposely spend time, going to a library or something and, looking up more about the country itself and the different castles. And so I may not be able to fulfill becoming an astronaut. I've heard people tell me that's what their dream is. I want to become an astronaut. You know, what percentage of the population becomes an astronaut? But if I can't become an astronaut, can I work with my provider to plan a trip to Florida to go watch the next, missile, space shuttle, whatever we call them these days, take off and go into space? So dream big and then use this to help the team make small steps towards that. So we've talked kind of all about this: establishing goals, clarifying goals, focusing goals, achieving goals. But I also think it's just also a fun activity that DSPs can do together with the people that they support. And when I send the packet, I am going to send, I found some instructions that are very easy read. They're purposely easy read instructions about making a vision board that you can use with the people that you support to help them understand, like, here's what we're going to do. And hey, here's, do you want to do this? I think this would be cool. So it's just easy read instructions on creating a vision board. And as you all know, it doesn't cost cost a lot to do one, but there are also apps out there that can do one that's more techy. I would be the one sitting down with scissors cutting pictures out of old magazines or whatever. But I guess nowadays you can't even find magazines. So I know that I would not be using an app, but there are apps out there to help people create their own vision boards. So excuse me. All right. I'm looking to see if there's anything in chat. All right, so meeting people where they are. So this is really just about making sure that as we're supporting folks, as we are helping them find their voice and share their voice, that we're really looking at where is the person at right now with their ability to do so, and what strategies can we use to help them, support them in doing them. I like that. We use the word spectrum a lot in the disability field. And that talks about the fact that everyone is somewhere on a communication spectrum. And that regardless of where they are on that communication spectrum, their voice matters. So here are some strategies for verbal communicators. Ask open-ended questions, which we talked about. Avoid those leading questions instead of, you like your job, right? Try something like, tell me what your job is like for you. Tell me about a good day at your job. Tell me about a bad day at your job. What do you like best about your job? So purposely making sure that as you're exploring what's important to and for the person, that you are giving them an opportunity to truly tell you and not just answer those yes and no questions. Go deeper, dig deeper with people. If answers are just surface level, keep in mind, a lot of people have never been asked to do this. And so they may not know what to tell you or how to answer your questions. So probe gently, say more about this. What would that look like to you? Have you ever done that before? Did you do that when you lived at home? How was it? What did you like about school? What didn't you like about school? Because what you liked about school and didn't like about school might apply to what you like about a day program or work or a job or whatever. So probe a little bit deeper with them. Try to initiate a conversation that provides meaningful information. Watch for compliance. So that's what you get with those yes and no answers, right? They're going to say what they think that you want to hear. I do that all the time. When I go to a doctor's appointment and my doctor asks me about my weight, what have you been eating? What's your diet look like? I know what it's supposed to look like. Let me tell you. Oh, I eat very few carbs. I try to stick on high protein. We do a lot of chicken and fish. And the last 2 nights we had pizza and McDonald's. But I know what my doctor wants to hear. So by digging deeper, asking those open-ended questions, and really being cognizant of, is the person just telling me what I want to hear? Those conversations will begin to build a trusting relationship with you where people can tell you what they feel. I will tell you this. I feel like that happens more when you get to a frontline supervisor, SSA management level. I feel like in a lot of situations, our DSPs have conversations with people that those people will never have with us, with those of us who have some authority or even perceived authority. So, tap in to that relationship that your DSPs have. Return to topics. Preferences change. So just because I told you this is where I want to work, or just because I told you this is something that's a dream of mine and let's put it on my vision board, return to that conversation. Don't feel like once I have an answer that I don't need to ask that question again. The answer may also be different depending on who's asking and where it's being asked. So again, this idea of helping to facilitate at the team level some consistency across providers and environments. Say, hey, here's the questions that we've asked, Sam before the meeting. It would be really cool if they'd ask the same questions at the day program or at school or with mom and dad when he's home, because the answers may change. Amplify their voice in the meeting. Um, but again, only if the person isn't able to participate or they've asked you to lead. Um, Otherwise, let the person lead and figure out how you can help them lead. And we talked a little bit about the vision boards, but I have seen some really cool movies where people are creating videos, and they are working with the person to say, hey, is it okay, if we go with you on an outing and we take some video, and it's a place that the person is very comfortable, that they really like it, like, can we use pieces and parts of that, to develop a video that shows someone's really good day? Like, this is what their best day looks like, right? So if you're techie, if you have access to that kind of stuff, I think that creating videos or helping people create videos, to share their voice, is a really cool idea. And it's not new. I mean, people have been doing it for a long time, but the technology again now to be able to do that is just amazing. And a lot of people may not feel as comfortable speaking up. So let's go to the nonverbal communicators. So utilizing devices, AACs, to help, and that's one of those techie words. So give me a second. I'll look up the actual. I know I'm running, like, I got like 5 minutes here. Because I always forget what it stands for. Augmentative and alternative communication. And so that's a lot of your communication devices, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure people have those. Make sure that, how many times when I was a compliance reviewer for the department, we would go in and people had them, but they didn't have batteries or they didn't have charging cords for them. So not only do they have them, but they work. Model communication. We talked about visual boards. Learn the person's language and behavior, their body language. Are they telling us they're not comfortable? Is this a yes or no signal? Use observation and repeated choice trials across activities to identify what really matters to the person. And then again, we talked about video or photo portfolios, that they could bring to the team to share. A person who does not speak or use words is not a person without a voice. Next. All right, so what do we do from here? Our role is to ensure that people's voices are heard, honored, and acted upon. A plan is only as rich as the relationship and knowledge behind it. So information is gathered in an ongoing way, and we don't wait till just that annual team meeting. We have to advocate that meetings are designed for the person. So the pace, the language, the space, and how that space is configured, are all important things for us to consider. All communication deserves full attention and response, even when that is nonverbal or behavioral communication. And we're advocates, not just support staff. When we elevate voices, we honor the person's right to a self-determined life. So think about that person I asked you to keep in your mind at the very beginning, and think about how you are going to go back and ensure that they are more actively engaged in their next planning meeting. And I hope that some of the tools and the ideas and the things that we talked about today will help you be able to do that. So I am looking in chat and I don't see any questions in chat. So that either means this was totally off point and people are like, nope, not useful at all, or it was done and we gave such good examples and information that nobody has any questions about it. So someone is asking, so I'm just going to go right into this. So first of all, thank you for joining us today, taking the time out of your day to do that. A copy of the presentation, so the slide deck, as well as the handouts that we discussed, will be sent out to you in a few days. A recording of today's session will be posted on the YouTube channel. And once you get this slide deck, that is a working link to the YouTube channel. So next week that will be live on the YouTube channel. Our next session will be held July 16th at 10 a.m. And we are going to be talking about the brand new Code of Ethics, DSP Code of Ethics. The Code of Ethics is a required training for DSPs in Ohio, and the National Alliance of Direct Support Professionals, who create the DSP Code of Ethics, has come out with an updated version of that. And I believe we will have someone from NADSP in the session with us. I'm working on that. So that will be our next session on July 16th. And then, as I said, if you had a question today, we didn't get to answer it, or you think about something later, you need clarification, whatever it is, that's my email address. Feel free to send me your questions. And thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day and the rest of your week. Join us on our Facebook page for updates, information, and networking between providers. Haida? Anything
Thank
you
you
want to
all
wrap up
so
with?
much. We appreciate you coming on. Stay tuned in our Network 19, as Ann said, on our Facebook page. Lots of news and keeping you all informed. So thank you all.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful day.